Hey, everybody, just want to let you know we are live on YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
Afternoon.
Hey, everybody, just want to let you know we are live on YouTube.
Thank you, Quinn. We're still waiting for a few members to join us, but in the interest of everyone's time, let's go ahead and get started. I think we should begin our COVID-19 statement. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the state of emergency, this meeting is being held via live video teleconference pursuant to 2020 Senate Bill 150 and in accordance with KRS 61.826 because it is not feasible to offer primary physical location for the meeting at this time.
Hello.
Hello, PG.
Hey, you get my message?
I did.
I go, okay. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. All right, why don't we take a moment to review our minutes from our last meeting? Let me know if there's any corrections, suggestions, and then if not, I'll take a motion for approval.
So moved. This is Johnny. So moved.
It's Josh. Second.
Minutes have been moved and properly, Second, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, that minutes have been approved. All right. Before we start in on, I want to talk a little bit about our meeting with our co-chairs and vice chairs this past hour. We're all moving forward with our reports. In the next 2 weeks, PG and myself and every other subcommittee co-chair will be meeting with the vice chairs to discuss our 3 recommendations, kind of outline of our report. We also presented our idea, PG and I presented our idea of taking that State of the Black report and using that report to further the overall commission task force goals of transparency, and sustainability. So we explained what we discussed at our last meeting as far as each of our individual subcommittees reviewing the subcommittee minutes and possibly talking with respective vice chairs of their little subgroup, and preparing kind of a template of that coincides with their objectives, with data metrics and ideas of ways that we can partner with either community leaders or different community organizations to sustain those objectives going forward. Beyond, each of our subcommittees reported. The Economics and Education Committee said that economics had met with Roy, and that there were clear metrics discussed between between Roy and our economics co-chair leader, and all of the subcommittees were on board. Co-chairs were on board with us doing that report. Love the idea of working with us and to tackle those three objectives of transparency, accountability, and sustainability with their respective objectives. Roz and Gerald also are on board with that report. They think that we could start with the racial equity report or either end with it as we kind of gather all of our different respective. One of the things that we talked about with respect to the health disparity group, they too will have a report ready that has some partnerships and that incentivizes the community to get engaged. And they were also encouraged to review the new Kentucky initiative and partner with them. So we may see some additional developments in that regard. Our Housing and Gentrification Committee have already set forth their list of recommendations, and they've assigned, as we did, different individuals of their subcommittee to work on writing up those recommendations and implementing that into a report. So Abdul and PG, I think you could follow back up with Shayla or Sexton, because I think they are the committee that at least has something, a draft in working. And they were also challenged by our vice chairs to look into the town branch project and how that is the impact of that project on like Main Street Baptist Church and other businesses downtown. Our law enforcement group, I spoke with David Kozart and follow up to our last meeting, and we kind of talked a little bit about the direction in which the law enforcement subcommittee was going and was headed. They too have identified some specific recommendations. They are definitely on board with partnering with us to identify additional data metrics for accountability, and then also to identify avenues or partnerships in which we can sustain some of their recommendations going forward. Josh, I know you had the opportunity to speak with Judge Kaufman. You and I didn't get to connect again. If you want to kind of fill in the group of kind of your discussion and thoughts with her in that regard, please do so now. Josh, we can't hear you. You're on mute. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, we discussed the metrics and the going forward. Her first comment echoed what we had said, that the observation that the template really didn't provide for metrics, but she did mention that she's working with David, and David was putting together, as he told you, some recommendations regarding metrics. And one of the things that she said, she was in agreement with our subcommittee conversations that the subcommittee should be kept intact to monitor progress towards meeting whatever goals are recommended by the committee. recommendation we can expect to see coming out of her subcommittee is a requirement that mandatory implicit bias training be implemented on a wide basis. And she was very receptive to sharing with us any recommendations and metrics that are adopted as a result of David's efforts. So I think we're all pulling in the same direction, it sounds to me like.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the full support of all the co-chairs and the vice chairs to move forward with the kind of the overall report. I think, within the next 2 weeks, our task will be to kind of take our subgroups that we made from our last meeting and really put pen to paper and start writing out some of, reviewing the subcommittee minutes, talking with the co-chairs of those subcommittees via email or cell phone if you can, briefly, not as a whole group because of because of the nature that we have to keep these meetings public. And then, kind of start pulling together some our own recommendations that we want to include in the report. And then kind of think we're going to have to either meet together again, if we can, Quinn or Arthur, or either circulate our various sub-reports via email so that we can make it into one cohesive document. So Josh and I will actually meet and connect again this week. Josh, I have reviewed all the subcommittee minutes from the law enforcement group, as well as all of the additional statistics and data that they asked for various departments to share, which are online. And I'm ready to meet with you so that we can start doing our component of the kind of law enforcement piece of the report. I would encourage the other group members to do so as well. And then with a goal that we have some type of draft document to share with one another by the end of the month, if that's too quick, no later than the Friday of Labor Day weekend, so that we'll have enough information to, we'll have that information to share with our vice chairs and also give them a draft so that when they meet with the mayor on September 16th, they'll at least know exactly what our draft will include, even though we don't plan to finalize it until after that time. Another big component, guys, of our meeting with the vice chairs and co-chairs, the co-chairs will provide their reports to us, or draft reports to the group for collective review and input before we all synthesize those to the overall report that Roz and Gerald will roll out. And it may be that our report is the report that Roz and Gerald roll out to include the other subcommittees reports that include the other subcommittee reports as well. We just don't know at this point. What do you guys think about that meeting?
I have a question. This is Josh, and I don't want to dump this on Arthur, but I'm about to. I'm wondering if we can put together individual separate folders that can be sent out to the committee with all the various reports, attachments, and the like, so that we're all, as they say, singing off the same page. Is that something you can do, Arthur, or is that something that somebody else can do for us? Or
now explain it to me again, if you will.
Well, for instance, with the law enforcement subcommittee, if you could take all of their minutes, all of the reports that they reviewed, everything that they are working off, so that when we're looking at it, I'm not missing something, or anyone else is missing anything with regards to their various subcommittee tasks.
Oh, okay, so you're saying so our subcommittee members having access to all of the information from the other subcommittees, is that correct?
Yes, and identifiable folders, so that we're not having to go through everything to make sure we have everything.
Yes,
so maybe
I'm
like a Google document that has separate tabs That way we can all work in and revise, create it within the same document, but all have all the information available in one kind of separate task, like Google Doc.
Yes, and I was going to say there is a Google Doc that has been created. I will, I guess, get the information to you all after the meeting. But yes, and I guess the other thing about it is, and depending on the subcommittees that have met and possibly not approved their minutes, now that information may not be in there, but everything else from when we first began should be.
Yeah.
But
And it's
yes.
all available right now on the link at the LFUCG government website.
Yeah, on the commission's website. But
Yeah.
Again, I'll make sure that everyone gets the information in order to access the information from other subcommittees.
Thank you.
Okay.
And in addition to our report, we were tasked with doing 3 objectives. We also talked about a communications, community engagement angle. And Devon, I wanted to get kind of your thoughts of it, because I know we're all talking about the youth and trying to get them engaged and things like that, but I want to really talk about the other 2, kind of go ahead and finalize our other 2 components of our recommendations that we're going to bring back to our vice chairs as a result of this racial equity group.
Okay. I know, and I would like to get with Paula too, but I do think I got Arthur's email, I guess, about the yard signs that the FOP was putting out. Is that right, Arthur? I guess about supporting the police department.
Yeah, yes, that was from the minutes from last week where we were having the discussion.
So I was studying and catching up. Apologize for missing last week. I missed you all. But me and wifey had to get away.
Okay.
It's been one of those years, but yeah, I think that there's some things that we can do through the PSAs, running radio ads with 107.9. But I also think being reactive, like obviously we all support the police department, but I think in putting those yard signs out, and I'm with Arthur, that it is meant to counter what we're doing in this commission and try to change the narrative. So again, I don't know what type of funding we would have to do that, but I think part of the communications from this commission has to be reactive to that type of thing. So there need to be yard signs that we're putting out, to control and maintain the narrative, and still obviously bring people together, but, keep the narrative at what it is. So I would love for our communication element of this to be reactionary, but I would love for us to have consistent messaging through the election, whether it's through radio, whether it's through social media PSAs, and then maybe even trying to reach out, through the recommendation to the mayor and having a weekly TV show, whether it's on the local station, whether it's KET, but having some type of format, whether it's a podcast, a weekly TV show that is dedicated specifically to what we are fighting for, so we can continue this conversation. Because again, we've all been in this work long enough to know that it can't stop here just because this is our deadline for the report. It can't stop at the election. This needs to be consistent throughout. So that's just a couple ideas I have, but I would like to get with Paula and get some more concrete things.
Oh, I love those. And are you guys committed to taking the lead on that component of our objective, the communication outreach perspective, and identifying metrics or recommendations towards that objective? I love everything you said.
Yeah, Devon, I just shot you an email to see if we can find time to talk. So we'll connect in the next day or so.
Hey, can I make a comment? Hello?
Please do go.
Regarding the yard signs, I've already coined the phrase that says in Lexington now we got we've got dueling yard signs in neighborhoods. One side of the street is support the police. Next side of the street is, Black Lives Matter. And I don't think that's doing the whole community much good anyway. Divine, I'm saying that to say if there's probably a way to do what you're talking about doing without putting another sign in the yard, but maybe doing it through the air, over the air ways, flying above the fray, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. I think so. I'm always kind of an all hands from every angle type of person. But I can see where you're coming from. Yeah.
Fly above the fray and with our message, and put our message where it doesn't conflict. Put our message where it's where we control it. As you said, we were told to control our narrative there.
Right.
Hey, folks, I hate to interrupt. Just real quick. Oh, they left the waiting room. There was a phone number in the waiting room, and I think it was Abdul. But I wanted to let him in and make sure before we went too far. But let's see if he calls back in. Thank you.
Let me add. We didn't get a chance to talk about it last week. It was very curious to me because I've seen those friends of the police signs in the businesses and yards. The president of the police, I guess the law of the police, whatever his title is, attended the law enforcement subcommittee meeting 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And they asked him the question about, does he believe that there's systemic racism within the police force? And he said no. And I don't know what the response was to that, but I thought it was shocking because there are a couple judges on that committee, and I expected them to kind of jump all over him, and they didn't. I know they got to work together in some way. But it was very curious to me that as soon as that meeting happened, I saw these friends of police signs being put in yard. So, I agree with both sides. Like, I want our message to rise up above that and make sure that our message is being taught, but we can't let this leader of the police department say that there's no systemic racism when we know that there is, and that's the reason this mayor has put this commission together. So
and Johnny and Johnny's 100%.
I didn't want to leave him. Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that I'm moving away from answering what he said, because when the mayor put this thing together, she said there was systemic racism in our community. Right. And so that's the stake is already in the ground, as far as I'm concerned, regarding that. But I just got this feeling that we fly above it, and I think we get a broader message. But that's I'm just one thought. That's all. One person's thought. That's all.
But, with respect to the reactionary component, our message could still be clean and fly above it. But I do believe that we do have to be reactionary when we know that there is a group that has this premise that there is not racism, and they are campaigning another message to the public that is not.
Are we talking about the message that says there's racism?
No. I'm talking about just the fact that we know we have a leader in place that doesn't believe in systematic racism.
Well,
after that, we have a strategic plan of them to distribute 50,000 signs across the community. Those messages are tied together.
They're already on order.
Right. So what I'm saying
it was mentioned the other night.
Where we do respond when we know about active campaigns to circumvent our overall purpose. We don't have to go below the belt. We don't have to call any names, but I do believe that there should be a strategic plan to respond when we're against strategic opposition.
Right. Because I think that whether it's politics, whatever it is, I think we can be intellectual. I think we can be layered enough to where we're responding, but we can still be above the fray. And it doesn't even have to be a Black Lives Matter sign. I think there's enough minds in this commission where we can come up with our own unifying yet phrases that are pushing for people that are being oppressed. I just think that there's a way that we could do that. But I think to not respond, that narrative just continues to flood people's eyes, and I don't think that takes us away from our larger work. And I don't think it's below the belt, to respond in our own way. And it doesn't even have to be anything seen as a response. I just think it is merely us just controlling our narrative. And like PG said, but I think we can do it from every angle, from the airwaves to the yard signs, to social media, to everything.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it popped up across the street in my neighborhood, and I mean, I know the guy. We've talked, so I just went over to say, I just went and had a conversation with him. Now, my daughter ordered a Black Lives Matter sign, but I went with me, so we had a great conversation. But
and there's strategy in that. And I'll say this, I'm sorry. There's strategy in that, because even I think with the young white child that was killed in Louisville, I believe, people were weaponizing his death to diminish people fighting for Breonna Taylor. They were saying, hey, where's the outrage about this young white kid being killed? But there is no rage because it doesn't fit the narrative. And they literally tried to weaponize his death, just like they know we support the police department, but they're trying to weaponize it to undermine what we're trying to fight for. And they're being strategic on the other side, right? Because we can't come out and say, well, we hate the police department, because we don't. We're just trying to hold them accountable. So I think we have to be just as strategic on our side and just as savvy in our messaging, because they've been doing it for years to try to control public narrative. And I think we just have to do that too.
Yeah. And folks, I don't disagree with anything that's being said, but I do think that it is an opportunity to educate, because you've got some who, on one hand, they truly understand that there is racism in this community, but they're pretending as if there is not racism. Then you got the other group who truly, and I've been asked this time and time again, why is it that all of the protests are occurring? I don't understand. Please talk with me. And so it gives us an opportunity to really educate those who want to be educated about what's really taking place. So I say, let's stay focused. The mayor has already said that she understands by putting this committee together that we have racism in this community. So we don't have to even really fight that, but do we need to be strategically aligned with the other committees so that we can move forward with our initiative? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. So those are just my thoughts,
Yeah. I think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah. So beyond our state of, racial equity report or communication component, what is going to be our third kind of key objective? I've heard, we've thrown about education. We've talked about the youth. Is that part of communication, educating during these kind of weekly things, or is that something separate, a separate partnership or a community outreach type program? What are you guys thinking?
Well, I think one of the first communication opportunities we have is to communicate the findings or the recommendations of these groups in a way that can reach multiple generations and multiple audiences. So when we get to the end, distilling that down, and maybe with the right, to Divine's point, that overriding message that resonates with the community. But we have to figure out how to get it to the community in a way that they'll absorb it and understand it and rally around it. So that may be a little bit longer term thing, just because how does that parallel with the get out the vote? How does it parallel with the engagement piece? I mean, there are multiple layers here, I think, of communication that I've started sketching some ideas out that I'll share with Divine and send over to you guys. But I think we have to look at who are our audiences, what is it we want to communicate, and how do we communicate to each specific audience, because they're going to absorb that differently.
Yeah.
Hey, Paula,
Right point.
Paula, just a quick question. Do you think we need to check in with the mayor's office in terms of communicating to the broader community?
Absolutely.
What their plan might be?
Absolutely. And they may have a plan. Yeah. And we probably ought to lean on some of our community partners who do good marketing and communication work to really put this together in a way that that looks like it is well put together and well thought through. So I don't know who those communication partners are these days, but I'm sure we have some folks in the community who, from an agency perspective or from the city may have enough resources in house, but this really needs to be put together in a good way with a social media component, a traditional media component, and a kind of a grassroots neighborhood component. I mean, where do people in neighborhoods get their news? I mean, they get it off the bulletin board at Kroger, or they get it, they get it in different ways on neighborhood Facebook pages. My neighborhood has a really active Facebook page. It drives me bonkers sometimes, but if you want to talk to the neighborhood, you got to get on the neighborhood Facebook page. So I think we've got to figure out how to get our fingers out there, our tentacles out there into the neighborhoods where people will see this information, not just a story or not just counting on them to tune in, but we got to get in there.
I agree.
And I think
I agree, Paula. I think one thing too, the mayor had mentioned, and something she attempted to do at Southland, I think having controlled spaces where we present this information, and not something we even promote to the community, but we promote to controlled spaces like large churches. Because obviously we're trying to empower our own community, but we want to inform other communities of some of these things that they may not even be aware of. And I think maybe going to corporations like Coca-Cola, or I know with my youth coat drive, I'm able to go and present and ask corporations for donations at their monthly meetings. So maybe having controlled spaces where people from the different subcommittees can come and present some of this information that we've learned, some of these tangible statistics about systemic racism that maybe some of these influential people in some of these churches and controlled spaces can learn. And then obviously that may inform them and impact them the way they vote or get engaged within their community. And I say control because I think there's so much protesting and so much going on right now that I think if we promote everything we do, then we're inviting other elements to come and kind of knock us off course. So I think that's a way we could be behind the scenes, connecting with the people as well, Paula.
Yeah, I agree. And you raise a really great point about getting major employers involved in this and committed to whatever the report and the recommendations are. Because if we really want a truly multiracial, inclusive community, those economic drivers in our community, the employers, the businesses, have a huge impact on how that is supported.
That's a good point, and I failed to mention that each of our sub-reports that we're working on, we should kind of not only identify community partners, but quote unquote stakeholders, those individuals within our communities that we know will endorse this project and kind of help shape, the narrative of this project. And those could be the major employers, presidents of the universities, or whatever. But also think about that, when we're doing our little sub-report, what stakeholders can we identify to help endorse and send this message, in addition to community partnerships, whether they be corporate, nonprofits, or systems of education.
Right. Look, Toy, I would hope that, and I would assume, but I would hope that many of our employers would endorse this already because we've been allowed to be on this committee. So not just us, but the other subcommittees as well. And so potentially you've got 60 employees already in the city that are supportive, you know, and then we need to reach out to the other like major, I don't know if Coca-Cola or UPS or FedEx or Amazon has representation within this area. But I would hope that our employers already have stake in this because we're being allowed to participate in this committee. You know?
Well, one thing I know I did, I've been speaking with Ray Daniels, who's the president of Commerce Lexington, and he is on board with sending our message and our reports to the Commerce Group as well, so we can work with them as well.
Yeah, because I can see this report as being part of the materials that the chamber uses when it's courting potential companies to come to town. The same way they want to know about the level of education in our schools and all those this is just as critical. And we want this to be information that's shared.
Okay. I don't want to, we've had great discussion and I don't want to stop anyone if they want to continue.
LaToya, let me just ask one thing. Everybody may be, many of you are familiar with the group Kentucky Nonprofit Network.
In your floor.
The movement that they've got going now to, I think they're going to be going to the council to talk about defunding the police. Nobody?
I'm familiar.
I'm not familiar with them. Is that a grassroots organization here in Lexington, or is that a bigger group?
Kentucky Nonprofit Network is long existing. That they've worked with nonprofits all over the state of Kentucky. They've just been more involved with nonprofits in Lexington since this budget came out, and most of the nonprofits were defunded. So they mobilized, organized,
yes,
and got themselves back in the budget. So now they're staying together, and they've been meeting on them for the last 3 weeks, and one of the mantras that they're espousing now is defund the police.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Pull it up. Look on their website. A lot of information there. I just thought it was interesting.
Is it I'll have to read it myself. Is it defund the police in order to grant those organizations
because the nonprofits should get more money.
Get more. I got you. Yeah. Okay. You know. Okay. I'll read up on it.
Okay. I think it'd be good for all of us to just look at that.
Yeah. And I definitely don't want to kill the discussion here. I just wanted us to we got about 20 more minutes here before I have to jump onto another call, but I just wanted to make sure that we were moving down the path of identifying, our third key objective. We have the State of the Racial Equity Report. We're going to have this communication outreach component. What is our third big objective that we want to push forward as one of our recommendations from the Racial Equity Subcommittee? From our previous meeting, we've talked about community engagement, education, things of that nature. We need to really kind of zone in on that here and really figure out what that looks like.
There's some real themes emerging in the subcommittees. And I was looking at the health subcommittee minutes around access, around I wrote it down. Around access, around cultural awareness, and that leads into the implicit bias conversation, and around, what's the third thing? Oh, insufficient representation in kind of those critical areas of like healthcare, legal, all of those things where there aren't enough doctors of color, lawyers of color, professionals of color in those particularly critical spaces. So I think it would be a great idea if we just kind of merge those themes a little bit and said, okay, where do you start? Which one do you pull? What can you do with that? So, but training, implicit bias and training is coming up in every single every single subcommittee report.
Paula, I
Yes.
agree. I was looking at the education notes. Taran and I talked about these, but the insufficient representation in teaching, and awareness, and the awareness part, and the awareness part is because of the implicit bias, because of the cultural standards, and because of the, for example, the teaching exam, the praxis exam, is such a rooted exam in cultural things that students of color are not aware of or not involved with, that the teaching or the number of teachers has declined in terms of teachers of color, because that praxis exam is not geared towards them, right? So I agree with you. Insufficient representation and awareness are two things that come up in the education part as well.
Yeah.
And going back to our overall definition, remember we talked about access, balance, opportunity, you know, so, you know, I like that, you know, tying that all back into our overall definition. That may work well. I mean, look, I'm just trying to think about, you know, how to synthesize, so that it doesn't become so big that we're not able to control it, identify metrics, and sustain. So, yeah, that's a great kind of way to think about this.
I think LaToya too, because I agree with both Paul and Johnny. What I'm hearing when I'm talking with the various people on the committees is we know what needs to be done, but how are we going to measure the outcomes of the various things that need to be done? And then here comes the big one. If you don't do it, then what are going to be the consequences? You know,
if you don't measure?
Yeah, if you don't, not only if you don't measure them, but if you measure them and you put a report out that says, and I'm going to use this as an example, okay, you're supposed to reach 15%.
Oh, okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Oh, if you miss your goal.
Yeah, you have a goal, but you missed the goal, then what actually happens as far as that whole situation is concerned? Do people just start over, say, oh, well, we don't have enough MBEs and DBEs? So that's what I'm hearing from a lot of folks that I'm talking with is we're going to put it together, but how are we going to actually measure the goal? And then the second part of the question is, if they miss the goal, then what's going to be our response?
I'm with Mr. Woods on that one. I think that if we figure out what the metric is, how to measure, I think that that'll factor into what is done if things don't get better. Because I think that's up to us to communicate the results, because some people are not going to, be voted for, or we're not going to advocate for. So I think that's part of it. That's part of the accountability. But I'm with you. How are we going to measure all of these things? And I think a lot of the stuff, reading through some of the minutes, I think some of it's tangible. I think a lot of what some of our subcommittees are asking for, it can be measured. I think it's just more about the time frame that we're giving some of these institutions, that we're giving some of these systems to make changes. And I don't know who would decide that or what makes sense for every request, but I think a lot of it's tangible. I think we'll be able to measure it. It's just a matter of how much time we're giving them.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of that lies into that last point. It lies into, kind of the overall co-chair's thoughts of, we're going to have to sustain this commission in some type of format, to really hold to get that accountability and sustainability objectives.
So is that our third point, LaToya? Is that what we're trying to come up with, or?
Yeah, we were talking about access, cultural awareness, and insufficient reputation, and trying to synthesize that into a third objective.
Okay.
There may be
Okay.
more themes too. Those were just the three
Yeah,
that out
yeah.
at me. So there's a lot in there.
That's it.
You know,
When you're thinking about accountability, though, you've got to think about what you can control.
right.
So, should we be focused on the governmental aspects of the community where we can hold people accountable? You can't really, unless you get the school system to buy in, or UK or whatever institution you're talking about. We don't have direct influence over institutions outside of our own government. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it does.
It does. It does. I'm hoping, and call me a dreamer if you want, but I'm hoping that as a result of what we're putting together here, that the mayor then goes out and says, look, this is going to start with me as the chief elected official of LFUCG. I'm going to put this model together based off of the report. And I'm talking now to the CEOs of every organization that's out here. And I'm asking you all to follow my model.
Mm-hmm.
I just think we've got to go there.
Roy, I hope she also says this is the where we're going and here's the funding behind it, because that's going to be the other part. You can't do none of this without money. so I hope, but again, as the chief elected official, she could hopefully identify funds, get grants, or put money in the budget, place the budget lines a certain way to make this happen.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
And that's where you start. You got to start in the pockets. I'm gonna be honest with you. In terms of if we're asking people to have a certain percentile, let's hypothetically say we're talking about hiring practices, right? And we want organization within 2 years to been hired 15 or 20% of their new hires be people of color, right? And if they don't, then they don't get awarded, whatever the mayor sets forth for that organization, their package for that year is taken away. Some of that money is taken away from them because they did not fulfill that goal for their institution or for their organization. So I'll give you an example. Here at BCTC, we have a hiring practice that the finalist has to be a diverse candidacy pool, or it's a failed search. There's no if buts about it. It has to have a person of color, has to have a woman. You can never ever know if a person is of the LGBTQA community unless they out themselves. But it will never be a cast of all white women, all white men, all black men, all black women. It has to be a diverse pool, or it is deemed as a failed search. So I would ask, does any of these organizations, whether it's nonprofit or profit, do they have a hiring practices that displays diversity, equity, inclusion within the system?
Yeah,
maybe a start.
That's a good point. And going back to the control, we can at least control, or at least arguably recommend to the city that those individuals that they award grant money to, that they award specific contracts or services to for outside vendors, have these types of mechanisms, 15% diversity. And when we're talking about diversity, we really get into the diversity. We don't mean women, or then we're talking about race diversity here.
Right.
Black and brown people and things of that nature. Those are things we can control.
Right.
At least as part of a recommendation that the city government could adopt and control.
And Ms. Mayo, you're right. And we have to be transparent and say that. We want racial diversity, not just diversity. Really transparent about it. So yeah, I agree with you.
That's it. And to add one other piece to it, the diversity needs to be in higher positions. I'm not talking about just the people who, and I'm not going to name any departments because people say, oh, you're talking about that particular department. But I'm talking about when it's time to make hiring decisions, you have to have diversity sitting in those seats and at the table. So those positions, will be able to include other diverse population. Otherwise, we're just spitting in the wind. And that's just where we've got to go.
That's a great point.
I agree. I agree.
Because you can have a diverse workforce, but not diverse leaders of that workforce.
There you have it.
Right, because you're to be perfectly honest with you, you're and if I'm thinking of it from a educational and a school and a college standpoint. A lot of our staff of color is in physical plant, in the cafeteria, but they're not sitting on presidential leadership teams. They're not, you know.
That's it.
And so, yeah, they can say you can take the data from to say that we are large. We have a staff of color. We have a large percentage of staff of color. But when you take out physical plant, janitorial, and cafeteria, those numbers plummet.
Right. So this is something that a councilman of the law enforcement group suggested, you know, specific recommendations, you know, and anything that we recommend and put in our reports, we want to be as specific as possible, yep. You know, and include those types of, you know, specificity, I guess, whatever, for lack of a better word, within our recommendations. So we're crystal clear.
Yes. That's it.
Hey, Toya. Toya. Yeah. One thing I want to just put on the record too, and I don't know if this is in the communication piece or the report itself, but I know there's a lot of organizations, whether it's the Black clergy, I know the Take Back Cheapside movement, I know Sarah and April and their cooperative and what they've been doing that have been working for a long time on a lot of the issues that we're addressing. Is there any way that we can acknowledge some of these other groups for the last several years that have been working towards some of the stuff we're putting in a report? Because I just think that acknowledgement is big, because I've lived in Lexington my whole life, and sometimes we can all get splintered, and it's kind of that, you know, that crab in a bucket mentality sometimes, and sometimes we get frustrated within the movement. There's not always a lot of collaboration, and there's just been so many people just like Russell and DeBron and Sarah that have been working, and in a sense, we're kind of standing on the shoulders of some of the groundwork that they've been putting in for a long time. And I just think somehow acknowledging their work should be a part of the report. And I just wanted to put that on the record. Like I said, even if it's just a list of organizations, individuals that have been fighting for this, because I am a glass half full type person, and I think something's going to come out of this. And I just want everybody that's been working towards it to get some acknowledgement, because I know a lot of my knowledge, a lot of my motivation has come from some of these people that have been fighting for years. So I just want to make sure that they're acknowledged somewhere in the report.
That's a great point. We got to get the community, all of the community, to buy in, you know. And I think it was David, and I spoke with him initially. He made a comment about, as part, maybe an objective of our group is not only identifying these different organizations that are all working for the same underlying cause, but having some type of schedule that we recommend, that we have some type of event. We all come together and we inform each other of our different platforms, our advantages, and we kind of have an agreement of kind of, you know, everyone's going to have their different objectives, but for lack of a better word, an agreed approach or protocol with respect to our different objectives. So I mean, I think that, I don't know where that fits in, but I think that's a key component. I think we'd be remiss to not include in our report or as part of our recommendation.
Well, that they become a key constituency in terms of buy-in and engagement. Yeah. And you want those groups at the table, either to, you know, tell us we did the right things or tell us we missed some things, because if they don't buy in and engage, then, you know, you still got splintered messaging going on in the community.
So should that be a part of the communication point, or should that be a part of our access cultural awareness? Because I can see it fitting in
All of
both
them.
and out in both.
All of them, yeah.
It can go in both.
Yeah.
Both.
Yep.
Yeah, that way we make sure we don't miss it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have, I see PG and I kind of taking the lead on the report with our respective subgroup, subgroups. I see Devon and Paula taking the lead on kind of the communication objective component. Who kind of wants to spearhead this, what we're calling access, cultural awareness, insufficient representation? And there may be some more kind of this overall catch-all of what we can do to further advance racial equity component of our last objective.
I mean, I don't mean to, I can take it. I mean, that's how I'm trying to do it in a positive way, not a negative way. I will take on that. Send me, Paula, I know you've already identified some things within your health area. And if others, as you're looking at those other subcommittee notes, just send me some notes that you've taken. Like I've already pulled some stuff from education.
Right.
I know others of you are working in some of those groups. So I don't mind to take the lead on some of that, gathering some of that data and kind of fusing it together.
Okay, so maybe we can have, once Arthur gets a moment to kind of pull those resources for us in that Google Docs system, maybe we can start plugging our each respective review of the subcommittee notes, objectives in there, and then also start working on our overall bigger objective report. I'd like to have something, a draft going within, like I said, I'd like to have something we could share within 2 weeks. So maybe we can start all working on drafting something over the next week and just sharing those over email until Quinn can circle back with the council and give us another meeting date. What do you guys think about that?
That works.
So remember, we're looking for specific recommendation. We want to identify stakeholders as well as community partners as also a component of each of our reports.
Sounds good.
And LaToya, one other part, will we be adding the equity indicators from each of the various subcommittees that we've been talking with? I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that we've got to begin to really look at what are they using, if anything, to measure their particular subcommittee. Let's say, for instance, like economics.
Right.
Okay, they put a goal out there. And so how are they going to measure that? I think that's going to be really important for each of the subcommittees as well. And I'm hoping that as a part of what I hear you talking about, that equity indicator will be there as well.
Okay, and that's a good point, Roy. Yeah, we definitely I think the subcommittees definitely understand that they shouldn't be including data metrics, but to the extent they don't, that should be part of our recommendation of that specific subgroup. And you want us to tie that back to equity as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So, I guess for purposes of PG and I, as you guys start reviewing your respective subcommittee notes, if you can get those out on the Google Doc, we can start synthesizing all of that information for the big report.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And LaToya, just real quick, this is Quinn. You guys are talking about doing another meeting. I guess that would be the week of August 31st, going into the first week of September there. Is that right?
What do you guys think? I know we're subject to, some other parameters behind our control.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear. We don't need to schedule another meeting yet. I'm just trying to get an idea of kind of what week we're working with here.
If you guys don't mind, I would like to meet again within the next 10 days.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah. I'm good with
We
that.
actually have a draft by that time to discuss.
keep the momentum. Yeah.
Would Thursday again at this time, the 27th work, if Quinn can make it happen?
It would not have worked for me. This
It
is
will not work, okay. What about the 31st? That'll give us a weekend to kind of, I love my Sunday morning, a non-work pass, Sunday afternoon. Y'all want to do maybe Monday the 31st? Would that work?
That would work for me. I'm good.
That would work for me.
It works.
It works.
Yeah, it works for me.
Works for me.
Yeah, Latoya, I think we should be able to make that work. And again, we don't have to schedule anything officially yet, but would noon work that day for everybody?
Works for
Yes.
me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why don't we tentatively say noon, and then I'll confirm that and get it to Arthur, and then Arthur will share it with the group.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Right. Great meeting, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Latoya.
y'all.
Yeah. All right.
Thank
talk
you.
soon.